welcome to Wapco Tech. We are still in a lockdown, but the good news is that smartphones have started to launch. So this week we have seen the iPhone SE, the 2020 version of the iPhone SE being launched, and apart from that, OnePlus expectedly launched the OnePlus 8 Pro and the OnePlus 8. And there's further good news that the Indian government is now finally going to allow mobile phones, TVs and laptops to be sold via e-tailers. That means through Amazon, Flipkart, maybe Xiaomi will be able to sell through me.com as well. So let's come back to the OnePlus 8 Pro, which is the phone that's worth all the hype. Before I really talk about this phone, I want to talk a little bit about OnePlus's journey to the OnePlus 8 Pro. OnePlus started off as an offshoot at Oppo. Pete Lau, its CEO and co-founder, was a VP at Oppo when this unit was spun off into a separate company, and in 2014 they launched their first phone, which kind of was a thumbs down to big corporations like Samsung and Apple, which was selling these really expensive high-end phones like the Galaxy S4 and the iPhone 5. And that's like back in 2014, iPhone 5s actually. So the real value proposition of a OnePlus device was that you were getting top of the line specs and a really cool design and really clean and fast software. Back then they used to use Cyan Gen Mod, and that was the value proposition because these phones costed like about a third of what you would pay for a top tier iPhone or a Galaxy S model. And sequentially over the course of the last couple of years, they have built on top of that rep. The OnePlus 3, for instance, a couple of years ago was a fantastic phone. It represented a leveling up of what we expected from OnePlus. The build quality was fantastic, the software was really smooth, and all the rough edges that were there in the OnePlus 1 and OnePlus 2 were kind of eradicated. And whittling down to last year when they launched the OnePlus 7 Pro and the OnePlus 7, later half of the year they had the OnePlus 7T and the 7T Pro. These phones were now not 1/3 of the price of a flagship phone. They were like almost 80% of the same price. But at the same time, these phones were starting to push a lot of boundaries of tech that one used to usually find on the flagships. For instance, the OnePlus 7 Pro was the first mainstream smartphone to offer a high refresh rate display. They had a 90 Hz refresh rate and a beautiful OLED screen, which was also rated really highly by DisplayMate. And for the first time, we felt that OnePlus had done something that even the mighty Samsung couldn't do. Were really known for their displays. And as always, the design was really spectacular. They had pretty decent cameras, and all around it became the phone of the year. This is what made OnePlus the top selling premium smartphone brand in India. And the way that was measured is every smartphone that costed upwards of 30,000, and all these OnePlus phones that launched last year were upwards of 30,000 rupees. So while the bedrock of the brand was of a pretender, they offered great value, but increasingly over the course of the last few years, they have started to become a proper flagship brand, even though the product hasn't reached that level. But while they were, one of those apex brands for geeks who used to laud this brand, would really have a huge community around it. They were this hero brand. Well, as the old adage goes, if you stay a hero or live to be a hero for long enough, you turn into a villain. And that's kind of happening with the OnePlus 8 Pro, which starts at $899, and the top of the line version, which costs around $999. So that's a lot of money. They're touching the $1,000 mark, which was first touched by Apple a couple of years ago with the iPhone 10. So is this phone actually worth this amount of money, especially in the environment we are living in with COVID-19? People are losing jobs, business are shutting down, the economy is tanking. is this sensible? And at the same time, is this phone actually worth that much of money? Well, there are a couple of indicators out here that this may not be entirely a bad thing. And the reason I say this is if you look at the spec sheet and what they have announced, and if you look at some of the early reviews that are out there by folks like MKBHD, Mr. Mobile, and the works, you will find the OnePlus 8 Pro to be pretty interesting. So let's start with the display, because that was the halo feature of 2019 on the OnePlus 7 Pro and the 7T Pro. Well, this year they have further improved the display, and that was something I personally felt wasn't possible because Samsung responded in kind. The Galaxy S20 has a stunning, spectacular display. It's got a 6.7-inch display, the Galaxy S20 Plus. It's got 120 Hz refresh rate and 240 Hz touch sampling rate. Well, OnePlus has pretty much matched that. It's got a 6.78-inch display, 120 Hz refresh rate, 240 Hz touch sampling, but they go beyond that. They offer you 10-bit color, which means the color gamut offers you over 1 billion colors. That's more colors than the Samsung phone. Well, that is surprising. And they have added a new chip by Pixelworks, which basically does a lot of motion smoothing. Essentially what happens is when you're watching videos are usually shot in 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, sometimes 60 frames per second, really rarely at 120 frames per second. Particularly most movies, most TV shows are in that 24 and 30 frames per second region. So when you're using a 120 Hz refresh rate screen, it's actually not leveraging the advantage of that. So what this motion smoothing technology does, it adds a couple of extra frames in the video content. It's an artificial enhancement. Some people like it, some people don't like it, but the cool thing out here is that OnePlus is offering this and you can manually turn it off in the case you don't like it. So that actually pulls this display one step ahead. And if you don't believe me and don't believe all these reviews, at least believe the guys who have been benchmarking these displays for a very long time. And of course I'm talking about DisplayMate. DisplayMate says this is the best smartphone display that they've ever tested, period. And before that, obviously they said the same about the Samsung Galaxy S20, but this one is actually better than the S20. It reaches 1300 nits in terms of peak brightness. That's insanely bright. That's probably the brightest I've ever heard a smartphone to be. And it aces 13 categories in the DisplayMate benchmarking system. That's the most by any other phone. Chances are this is going to be a stupendously gorgeous display. But there's more than the display, obviously. This phone is supposedly going to be the fastest Android smartphone of the year. Well, it has all the goods. It's powered by Qualcomm's latest Snapdragon 865 chip, which also theoretically supports 5G, but that's kind of useless in India. You get up to 12 gigabytes of RAM, DDR5, which is basically the fastest one, and you get UFS 3.0 storage. The OnePlus 8 Pro starts at 128 GB storage, and there's also a 256 GB version of the phone. So all the goods are there. And on top of that, there's Oxygen OS. The latest iteration of Oxygen OS is more refined. They've got a new dark mode out there. They've done a lot of software optimizations out here, which basically ensures that this phone is going to be even faster. They have actually gotten rid of the OnePlus shelf, which used to be there on the left hand side, and they've put the Google Today screen, which is there on the Pixel and Android One smartphones, which is something I really appreciate. So that's really, really good, and OnePlus has got a great track record of updating Android. And the reason I feel that this is probably going to be the fastest Android smartphone that we will test through this year is because when I look at the OnePlus 7T Pro, it's almost as fast as the S20. And the S20 is using a Samsung Exynos 990 chip, which is plenty fast, which was definitely faster than the phones like the OnePlus 7T Pro, but the difference wasn't that much. Well, this phone is expected to be much faster, because the Snapdragon chip is said to be faster than the Exynos 990. At the same time, it's supposedly going to be even more battery efficient and it manages its thermals better. It's also going to be better for gaming. So pretty much this is going to be the fastest Android smartphone in 2020, and at the same time it'll have the cleanest software and smoothest software experience. But the reason that these things were already good in OnePlus 70 Pro, these were aspects that they had already nailed. The reason that most people kind of stopped short of calling them true flagships last year was that they were missing certain features that one expects of just the most expensive smartphones. For example, there was no wireless charging. Well, guess what? The OnePlus 8 Pro gets dash wireless charging. They have got a new dash wireless charging dock, which charges the phone wirelessly at 30 watts, which is basically the fastest wireless charging smartphone that we have seen yet, in India at least. On top of that, you get wired charging, that's also at 30 watts. You get IP68 water and dust resistance, which wasn't there last year. Well, they've finally done it. You get dual stereo speakers with Dolby Atmos support. Fantastic, that's really important. And the cameras. OnePlus says that they have really upped their game with the cameras. Well, they said the same thing last year, but this year there's more evidence that they might have actually finally nailed the cameras. Now the reason for this is that OnePlus usually borrows a lot of their hardware from Oppo, their sister companies at the end of the day. Usually a new OnePlus phone is borrowing a lot of components from a flagship Oppo phone. So this year, the Oppo Find X2 Pro had a really unique camera system. It used the Sony IMX689 sensor coupled with a Sony IMX586 wide-angle sensor. And it had a couple more cameras like a telephoto and also a depth sensor. And the folks at DxOMark rated it as one of the best camera smartphones out there, right up there with the Mi 10, only to be eclipsed by Huawei's P40 Pro. And it turns out the OnePlus 8 Pro is using the same sensor. It's using the same Sony IMX689 48 megapixel sensor as its primary camera. It is using the Sony IMX586 as its ultra-wide camera. And by the way, this 586 sensor was the primary camera of the OnePlus 7T Pro. So this is a really top-class sensor. This is probably the best sensor we have actually seen on an ultra-wide camera, which should ensure incredible ultra-wide shots, incredible landscape shots. And if you look at some of the reviews by folks like MKBHD, Mr. Mobile, The Verge, they all say in daylight, the OnePlus 8 Pro is right up there with the iPhone, with the Google Pixel. And even in night mode, it is able to hold its own. The one area where it kind of falls behind is lighting like this, dim lighting. OnePlus has really not managed to nail this kind of lighting, but OnePlus has proven this time and again they consistently deliver software updates at a breakneck pace, and I am assuming that they might be able to fix this. On top of this, all the reviews say that this phone is also really good at 4K video. It shoots 4K video at up to 60 frames per second, and it can do 4K video at extended dynamic range as well. That's really impressive. Also, this phone gets a color filter, which is very unique. It's not proven what its real use is, but time will tell. It also does 3x hybrid zoom, which is good enough. It's not crazy, wacky 50x, 100x space zoom like Samsung's Galaxy S20 models, but who cares? Most people are not going to gawk into their neighbor's windows using a smartphone. It's actually not worth it. So, and it's kind of illegal also at the same time. So, 3x hybrid zoom is really good enough. On top of this, you also get a pretty large battery, and OnePlus's phones have been known for their battery life. This time around you get a 4510 milliampere battery, and if I had to compare it to the Galaxy S20 Plus, which had a 4500 milliampere battery, I am guessing this phone is going to deliver better battery life. And the Galaxy S20 Plus does quite decently because it's able to retain a charge for around 12 to 13 hours, which is basically a day long use. This phone should do better because it's got a more efficient processor, and generally OnePlus's battery management game is also on point. Other than this, the design of the phone is more or less an evolution, but it's really very well built. It's aluminium and glass, matte finish on the back, but they've got some really cool colors. They've got this really classy glacial green, which is kind of a metallic take of the surf green that we saw on the iPhone 11, but it's also tapered on the back. It's a curved back, and at the same time you get this really supple satin finish because of the matte finish, which isn't there on an iPhone because that's a gloss finish. And there is another unique color called the ultramarine blue, which is more like an indigo color, closer to this maybe. And I really like that color, but that's only available on the top of the line version. That's also matte finish. So I'm really liking what OnePlus is doing with unique colors and yet keeping everything classy. And you also get a pretty standard glossy onyx black. Black is a timeless color, so that had to be there. In terms of pricing, I'm expecting this phone to be around 65,000 rupees, which is a lot of money. It's going to be right up there with the Galaxy S20. But I feel if they have managed to nail the camera, I think it's finally time for the OnePlus to graduate out of being a flagship killer to actually being a flagship phone. And for most people, if the cameras are good enough, this is going to be the de facto Android smartphone to go for.